Hi, this is James, and I'd like to welcome you to the Oracle Outlook for the week starting May the 21st, 2018. Last week I had shared that my theme for deck selections over the next few Oracle Outlook video readings was going to be decks that I hadn't handled or hadn't touched or hadn't appeared in this space in some time. And as a result of that, some of you were very nice in sending hints and suggestions for decks that you would like to see in future readings. And so this week, I'm going to take a viewer up on her suggestion. And for Cheryl, if you're watching this video, hi! Cheryl actually suggested that I use the Kadar Fortune Cards, and I realized I hadn't used that. I think the last time was at the beginning of the year, so that would be January. So I haven't used it since January. So that is going to be the choice of deck for this week. So the Kadar Fortune Cards are by Christopher J. Gould, and they come out of his company, Magic Tao. So I have the deck on hand. I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the cards. And as I always do for these weekly general readings, my intention and focus while I'm shuffling is on the question, what do we need to know for the week ahead? Feeling one more time will be good. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut the cards. Now I'm going to fan them out. And now I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. We have 3, 4, and now we're looking for the final card. Number 5. I was like, where are you, number 5? Okay. So it'd be very interesting to see what that card was. All right. So now we have the line face down in front of me. And I'm feeling inclined to start with the middle card. I always say this. So the middle card for me represents the central issue or something that we're being asked to focus on for the week ahead. Taking a look at the card, we have here the 3 of clubs. So the 3 of clubs usually represents seeing some progress being made with a situation that we have put some work or effort into, because I read the suit of clubs as work and business, but if it's not work or business in the literal sense, then I tend to read work as implying effort. And the 3 is a number of results and productivity. So for me, this could represent like we're at the beginning stages of seeing some progress made with a situation that we have put some effort into. That is one way of looking at it. So you can ask yourself the question, where have I been putting some effort into a particular situation, and taking a look at that and seeing what results have you gotten from your work or labor. That is one way of looking at this. If it is an actual work or business situation, because for some people it may actually literally mean work or business in that sense, then the 3 of clubs for me can represent like somebody may be entertaining the idea of being on the first step in a ladder of success. So somebody may be thinking about climbing the ladder and starting that process. You're literally at the bottom of the ladder and you're starting to take the first step towards getting that. Somebody, if they're in a new working situation, I tend to look at the 3 of clubs as on-the-job training, right? So with that, I'm being reminded, if we want to take the idea of life being something that we learn from, because the suit of clubs for me in that sense can represent teaching and learning. If we look at life bringing experiences our way that teach us something and we learn something from as a result, then it could be about you getting some on-the-job training through a particular life experience, right? Something that's going to expand, because the number 3 is about increase. It's about increase and expansion. So something that's going to expand your understanding about something, because the 3 of clubs for me can represent understanding, right? It could also be too, like you may be taking a concept, a theory, an idea of something, and practically applying it to your life, because sometimes too this can represent a practical application of something. So that's how I would read the Three of Clubs. So again, general context, it could be a matter of gaining some understanding about a situation. You're at the beginning stages of seeing some progress being made from a situation that you have put some effort into. You're starting to see, the best way I could put it is like the fruits of your labor for that. So a particular situation, if it's in the literal working or business sense, then you may be at the bottom and working your way up and starting the first step in that process if you're actually thinking about climbing the ladder, moving up, that kind of thing. And then the last thing would be, again, this idea about understanding a situation. You've gained some understanding that's going to help propel you and move forward. The only other thing about this, as I'm talking about all those other things, is about the general sense. Again, this is very general. This is something that would apply to all of us. This is a time for broadening your horizons and exploring options. That's the Three of Clubs. So now let's take a look at the surrounding cards, because they're going to offer us more information about the central issue, right? So I just went through the first card giving a general sense of what the card might mean, but the messages could become more specific or shift in relation to the surrounding cards. So the card on the far left, opening the line up, we have, okay, so here we have the Seven of Diamonds. The very first thing that I want to say about this, and I'm going to put this in relation to the idea about putting work or effort into a situation and starting to see some results or starting to see some progress with that, because the Seven of Diamonds represents investment. This is a card that can literally represent a lot of money, but for me, I tend to look at it as, in the financial sense, when I talk about a lot of money, usually this card can represent things like stocks, bonds, investments. But if it's not about money in the literal sense, then I usually go with the idea about investing our time, energy, and resources into a situation and seeing some sort of reward for those efforts. Like we get a return on our investment. So it could be, as the first card, we may be contemplating, because the number 7 represents introspection and self-awareness. So this card could be saying too, like, we're taking a step back, because remember, I'm being reminded of what I talked about last week with the eye from the Gypsy Witch cards, right? So we're taking a step back and we're observing. So maybe whatever it is that we engaged in last week in terms of observation, this card opening the line up would suggest we've done the work, we've done the observation, and now we're asking ourselves a challenging question. Is that situation that we've been observing, that I put time and energy and maybe even my resources into, what was the return that I got on that investment? And then the other question underneath that, was that worth it? Because I'm hearing in my head, people who love my musical references because sometimes they're a little obscure, there's a song by the Pet Shop Boys, and it's called Was It Worth It? So I'm hearing that. So somebody may be asking the question about the return on the investment of time, energy, and resources into a situation. Was it worth it? So that's it. But if not, then we're just being given a heads up about engaging in things with our time, energy, and resources, and we have to go in knowing to some degree what we're hoping to get as a return on that investment of our time, energy, and resources. So that's how I would look at the Seven of Diamonds. So now the next card is, okay, Six of Spades. This card, the Six of Spades, shows up a lot when I'm using playing card decks. So the Six of Spades for me can represent this idea of a situation that's coming to an end once and for all, because spades for me can represent some sort of problem, challenge, block, obstacle, right? So with that in mind, the 6 is a number of taking responsibility for that. So it could just be a matter of going with the order of the cards. If we're taking a look at, the time, energy, resources we've been investing into a situation, and we may not be so happy with the level of return that we're getting, then this card as a follow-up could be suggesting, what would we need to do, 6 being the number of responsibility, in terms of bringing that situation to a close? Because this card, and I always say this when a card comes up, it usually represents ending something once and for all so we can progress and move on. And that would make sense with the 3 of Clubs coming after the 6 of Spades, right? And that's also very positive, because if I go with the order of the cards, Spades being a card that represents problems, challenge, difficulties, followed by Club, which represents work, business, and progress, could be suggesting too, like if there's a problem or a difficulty that we're having, we're going to find a way to work it out, but it may require some level of effort. That's how I would read the combination of spades and clubs, right? So there is that. So with that resolution to the problem, possibly it could just be a matter of taking a look at the level of responsibility. It just may be a matter of we're going to have to assume responsibility for bringing that situation to a close. I also call this the difficult conversation card. So it could just be a matter of if other people are involved, then it could just be a matter of we have to have a difficult conversation, and it may surround somebody's level of responsibility. Right? So it could just be saying to you, we may need to have a difficult conversation with somebody who may not be as responsible as they could be in the situation, and that's what's creating the problem, right? So either one or two ways, either we need to have a conversation and we need to say, okay, what are we going to do to resolve this, or we have to assume responsibility and find a way to resolve it on our own. And then as a result of that, it may create the space for us to move on to the next thing, right? So that is how I would read the Six of Spades. So now let's take a look at the card, if I can get the words out, at the card on the other side of the Three of Clubs. Okay, no mistake here. Okay, so here we have the Two of Spades. So now we have another Spades card in the line. So this may be about working some problem out. And then ironically, because another Spade card follows a Clubs card, it could be we work out of one problem and work our way into another problem. Possibly, right? The Two of Spades for me can represent a problem in a relationship or some sort of difficulty in a relationship, because the number 2 represents relationships and partnerships. It could also too be a matter of there's some sort of conflict within that, and it could just be a matter of people are not being cooperative. So that conversation about responsibility that we may need to have in some cases, not for everybody, but in some cases, it may center around this idea of people on the receiving end, since it comes after the Six of Spades, being on the receiving end, not being cooperative, right? It could be a matter of, you know, if we go with the other side, the more positive side, and I talked about this idea about maybe suggesting what can we do to resolve the situation, then this card could suggest this idea about sharing ideas, because the number 2 for me can represent sharing, and then spades would be about this idea, because I tend to look at spades as ideas, because for me it represents air as an element, and air is the mind. So it could just be a matter of getting together and sharing ideas. But also too, sometimes the best way to resolve a problem, if there is some sort of conflict, if we have a difference of opinion, you know, or conflicting ideas about that, then sometimes we have to get to a space where we say we're just going to have to be willing to agree to disagree. So that's how I see the Two of Spades. And as I'm saying that, another thought that's coming to me about the Two of Spades could be this idea about being forced to make a decision, or feeling some sort of pressure to make a decision, because sometimes the Two of Spades for me can represent force or pressure, right? So it has to be a thing where not allowing other people to put force or pressure us into making a decision that we may not be fully on board with, and vice versa. Not putting force or pressure on another person, right? Because that usually doesn't end well. You want it to be where people are in agreement, not disagreement. So that's how I would look at the Two of Spades. And so now rounding out the line, we have, I knew one of them was going to show up. So here we have the Black Joker, right? And I call this card the Black Joker because the Joker is holding a crystal ball, and the crystal ball is black. So for me, that usually represents something that we can't see, something that is unknown, something that is undetermined, right? So there is that. Now, usually for me, the Black Joker can usually represent this idea of something that's a bit of a shakeup. So if we go with the idea that the Two of Spades, the card that came before it, could be this idea about a split, a separation, something of that nature, you know, and it would make sense with this idea with the Six of Spades about, you know, this idea about moving on, resolving a situation so we can move on. Then it may come with a split or some sort of separation with that, right? And if that's the case, if that resonates with somebody, then the Black Joker would be a card that represents some kind of major shakeup, you know, something being revealed, because the Joker on the card is peeking his head out behind the curtain. So it could just be saying too, like there was something that we couldn't see clearly, or something that was concealed or covered up, and now there's some sort of exposure, or something's being revealed, that kind of thing. Now, the other thing with the Joker card for me, sometimes this card can represent this idea about something being dressed up in a particular way, because the Joker card has a person who is wearing a mask or wearing makeup or something of that nature. So there's something about the way that we have chosen to see it, or the way that a person has presented him or herself. And so there may be something about that. Like you actually get to see somebody as they are, you know, like dropping the facade, dropping the mask, dropping the disguise, something of that nature. It's like we really get to see somebody as they are, and as a result of that, we have to make a decision. Do I like what I see? Do I like what I'm being presented with? If I don't, what am I willing to do about it? Kind of thing. But I'm thinking like this is an idea about pulling back the curtain and seeing what's behind the curtain. As I'm saying that too, it's making me feel like what's behind the veil. But pulling the curtain back and seeing that. So, but again, the Joker usually represents some sort of surprise, some sort of shock, some sort of wild card. It usually represents a wild card, so something about something of an unexpected nature being thrown into the mix, right? So there is that, but it's making me feel too, with the Joker peeking out behind the curtain, that there is some sort of maybe revelation, some sort of shakeup, something of that nature. And again, with the black crystal ball, it could be helping us see something that we couldn't see before. Because the idea of a black crystal ball is you can't see. The future is not clear, it's not known, it's not determined, right? So I'm seeing that with the Black Joker. And on that note, I'll go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week. Take care.